you don't need to have a coffee on an immutable ledger. It's not a necessary, it's just spamming the network at that point. Lightning is meant to be something that is streaming money. You're not looking to transact and watch exactly where it's going on every, that's actually a feature of it, that it's not as easy to see where everything is going, right? So there's two different things. One is the main base layer. It moves slow. It is very sturdy, the same way a tank is, whereas L2 is much more fast and nimble, and you can try a bunch of different things. But again, the drawbacks are it's not as strong and secure. So everything's going to have its layer. But one thing I do want to push back on that you said is proof of stake is as secure as proof of work. That is, I think, the most blasphemous thing you've said.
Yeah, it's fine. Give the viewers a bit of an introduction about what you do.
Absolutely. My name is Jacob. I am the co-founder and CEO of OneBitcoin.ca. It's a website that focuses on primarily educating individuals and business owners in Canada. We do consulting outside of Canada as well, but specifically for Canadians, helping them understand the technical aspects of Bitcoin and figuring out what areas of their day-to-day lives we can implement this technology for them to use it.
So it's just only for Bitcoin, right?
Bitcoin only. That's it.
Perfect. So why did you make this choice, like only to choose Bitcoin, or rather to focus only on Bitcoin?
Fundamentally speaking, because I genuinely believe Bitcoin is the only asset that has fundamental value and use case for the long term. I think the crypto space is far too convoluted, and at the end of the day, anything useful can be implemented onto the Bitcoin chain. But unfortunately, a far larger amount of these cryptos are really just experiments and, most importantly, centralized entities that are operating under the guise of decentralization and innovation.
Is it okay if I give a little bit of a pushback about this?
Of course, absolutely.
Okay, so let's say, for example, you want to make a transaction for any reason, because I like to use cryptos and not just HODL. So, for example, you want to make a transaction on Bitcoin, it would take like at least 10 minutes theoretically, but in practice, if you want to actually get a couple of confirmations, it might actually take like an hour or so. So, is it like practical for use, or is there other solutions?
So if you're thinking about use cases being payment settlement and like really for coffee, which is like you want to know immediately, I think that there are better solutions such as layer 2. We've got Lightning now, which again is in its infancy. It's still a newer technology. However, I think the biggest issue when people focus on the transactions per second or how quickly the transaction will settle, I think they're overlooking a key aspect of what Bitcoin actually does, right? And the fundamental importance of what Bitcoin is number one, it is an innovation or computer science breakthrough that found digital scarcity. So something digital of nature that is scarce, absolutely scarce. But beyond that, the fact that no one person controls it or can decide what's going to happen with it. It's kind of like a seed that was left out into the world and now it is growing at its own pace. So the fundamental proposition of what Bitcoin offers is the digital scarcity aspect and then final settlement. So whereas maybe Bitcoin is not at its level of adoption or evolutionally like has evolved to the point where you're going to pay for it for coffee. But I'm in Canada. In Canada, I want to pay for my coffee. I can tap my debit card. I pay for it. I'm moving on with my day. Where Bitcoin really jumps in and finds the use cases is the ability to do cross-border transfers, where even though it's 10 minutes, 10 minutes is still insanely fast compared to the banking system where it takes 3 to 5 business days to send the exact same wire. So yeah, I think at the end of the day, if you're going to compare it to instant settlement, you're going to go layer 2. But I think when you're looking at highest and best use and what is the most important thing for this asset to do, I think Bitcoin has very, very important steps to meet and objectives to meet, before paying for a coffee. And that is storing your value and allowing you to transfer value with anyone, anywhere around the world with no third-party participation. That's the the key for me. That's where it really struck for myself.
Okay, so let's agree. I think the Bitcoin use case for store of value is pretty like agreed upon. I think there's nothing
Yep.
close. But let's say, for example, okay, you're already doing that for the Bitcoin, like using it as a store of value. But when you're paying for coffee, you say you would rather use a credit card. So for you, you'd rather use a credit card than use a blockchain that's verifiable, like another blockchain other than Bitcoin?
I would rather use Lightning, which is a technology that is stacked on top of Bitcoin. My biggest issue, and again, I went through the whole, like, I got into Bitcoin, then I got into crypto. I researched all the cryptos. For me, the issue is right now we're talking, which internet are we talking on? Well, there's only one internet. That internet that we're on right now didn't have the capacity 15, 20 years ago for us to have this discussion as we are right now. Look, we press the button, we're able to connect and talk. So what I'm in my hypothesis or my theory of where it's going to happen is everything is going to happen on one chain. You may have different layers of that chain, but you're not going to have to do atomic swaps or jump out and in to these different chains to use different coins, because at the end of the day, then what's the point? What are we using that coin for?
But let's go to the practical use. So, for example, for me
Sure.
personally, when I do any transaction, I prefer crypto. So if someone is offering crypto, it doesn't matter it's Bitcoin for me or others, as long as
Right.
obviously if something I'm in rush for, like let's say for example I'm paying for a service. If you want to buy a domain name, for example, sometimes you just want to get it as fast as possible if it's a good thing. Like this is just a very practical example for me. So I would just
Sure.
rather use a crypto that's very fast to settle, okay, because it's settling on the chain. But then sometimes if I want to pay for some services, they only offer Bitcoin, or it's not really in a rush. Let's say, for example, you want to pay to your email service. You just normally you would renew it like yearly or something, so it's not really in a rush. So I can use Bitcoin for that. So the question I'm asking is like, for example, yes, maybe the other cryptos obviously not as centralized, and some of them even have companies behind them. So it's some of them are a bit questionable, but for me, it's much better than fiat system. So like if you compare the fiat system, there is absolutely no transparency. If your transaction didn't go through, you don't have control over that at all. You don't see like what's happening. You don't even control your money because theoretically perspective, like you actually even the money in your bank is not yours. So I would rather use crypto than use fiat for this reason. Not to say that it's better than Bitcoin and everything, but some aspects are better, maybe like the speed. And going back to Lightning, if I understand correctly, it's like the one who is doing most of the development, similar to other crypto, is a company as well. It's Lightning Labs. So what's your perspective on that?
So while Lightning Labs may be the front runner of who's building on it, what they're building with is open source. So Lightning Labs can build what they're doing, but the protocol is available for anyone and everyone around the world to build as well. So even Lightning actually can work for Ethereum. Lightning works for a variety of different chains. Lightning isn't specific to just Bitcoin. It's just going to make the most sense because Bitcoin has the largest network effects. Now, to your comment about I'd rather use crypto than fiat, I completely understand that. I'm not saying there is no use case for cryptos. I know people who use Bitcoin as a payment rail, but then they trade back into USDT or USD. But my issue with the whole crypto sphere is the fact that there is a huge misconception, and it's maybe even misleading with how much the crypto ecosystem says this of its decentralized and its innovation. If everyone keeps treating USDT, look what happened this weekend. You're thinking it's stable, it's a stable coin. It's you're trusting another corporate crypto. At the end of the day, the key difference, and this is what it fundamentally boils down to, Bitcoin is a technology. There is no counterparty. If you own your Bitcoin and you are holding it in cold storage, you are fundamentally free from the decisions and the choices and whatever craziness is happening in the world, because the Bitcoin blockchain operates completely separate from everybody else. In any other crypto, whether that's Ethereum, whether that's a stable coin, whether that is an NFT project, whatever it is, I'm not saying that it is wrong or it's a scam or anything bad behind it. My point is that there is a centralized group behind it. and you are trusting that group for having put something together and they're reviewing the code, and it's usually not very open source. And even if it is open source, it isn't very secure. So it just doesn't meet the requirements that I have for what I believe we should be focusing on. And the only other area for me is I run an exchange. We sell these crypto assets. So I don't feel comfortable selling any other asset other than Bitcoin, because I know that most of these are centralized, and that means when you're buying in, any other crypto, you are basically buying a security. It's like buying a stock in a company, right? Where a lot of people have this misconception that it is this decentral. No, it's just you're using a different thing that's being used as a payment rail. So my issue is Bitcoin is what is going to continuously grow. That's what's going to continuously get adopted around the world. And it may not be where it needs to be. I guarantee, I agree with you wholeheartedly, but the ecosystem has to catch up. We're only 14 years in. The internet, which what we're doing right now, is at least 40. So my main thing is, yes, I agree with you that maybe there are limitations, but one thing I would push back is when you are going to go pay for a coffee, the way I envision Bitcoin is the Bitcoin is the bank of the internet. It is the Federal Reserve. It is the strongest, most secure of the internet. So would you use your the Federal Reserve to be making a coffee payment? Federal Reserve, or the big bank, the big fortress, is the bank that you're using for the most expensive, most secure, fundamentally important transactions, right? So that's where I would kind of say Lightning is going to offer you a little bit more liquidity and a little bit smaller payments. But again, everything has its pros and its cons.
I agree with this, but my whole issue is that when we say that other crypto are not decentralized, it's relatively speaking. So it might be relatively speaking to Bitcoin, but like a lot of cryptos, they have the open source nodes. You can actually run and mine them or like stake them. So it's basically it's managed by the community also. Yes, there is a centralized agent like a company or like an entity behind them, like which developed them initially, but a lot of them actually are in the hands of the community. So for example, let's say Ethereum, yes, there is like still, for example, a centralized force, let's say Vitalik Buterin and all these figures who can actually influence the network. But at the end of the day, I mean, technically and practically, the other miners, for example, or right now stakers, they can actually also decide if they want to upgrade the system or no. So it's like there is a consensus also. So it's same as Bitcoin also. When they want to upgrade to Taproot or all this, they still need the consensus from the miners. So it's not like black and white. I think there is like some gray area there, like some advantage and disadvantage for other crypto. So and my whole notion is that yes, we are using Bitcoin for this centralized reserve. I don't want to mold it into being like a payment for coffee, but we need a solution for that, and the crypto is offering that. So why are we just rejecting that just because as if this is like either or? So either I'm Bitcoin and fiat, or I'm or like I'm only crypto. Why not just use Bitcoin for what it's good for and crypto for other things?
So, okay, so I like that you brought that up. So a few things on Ethereum. So a lot of people say it has centralized forces, but it's still the community. The community is the centralized force, and I'll explain why. Number one, Ethereum was a pre-mine. Percent of Ethereum that came to existence was centralized by a group of people that had the ability to print out of thin air. Bitcoin, not one single Bitcoin has ever been mined or is in circulation that wasn't exchanging energy for it. So that's the first difference. We're right there. Ethereum has just gone away with it because it's been around for so long, but I think regulators are starting to catch up with it. Number two, I think it's a huge issue with the fact that you cannot run your own Ethereum node on a cost conscious basis. You need to spend around $10,000 in hardware with enough memory space to run your own node. And even when you run your own node on Ethereum, your Ethereum node is connecting to a MetaMask or the Ethereum Foundation. You're asking them to give you an update as to what's happening on the Ethereum network. The beautiful thing about Bitcoin is the fact that for $150 worth of computer parts that anyone anywhere around the world can buy, and as long as they have a connection to the internet, they can connect and sync with the real Bitcoin blockchain. That is the power behind it, is the fact that you are not connected to anyone else. No one else, you're not relying on anyone else. You're not waiting for someone else to tell you how many. Like Prince, you could download the Bitcoin blockchain right now, and you can verify right now, and my node will like give you the exact same number of how many Bitcoins are in circulation around the world. Now, that may not sound like a big deal, but that is what gives Bitcoin its power. So once we start doing that sliding scale of, okay, it's not as decentralized as Bitcoin, and now we kind of going, it's a little bit less decentralized. Well, then it becomes a discussion of, well, then decentralization is not an issue. So then we can bring in Solana, we can talk about Cardano, we can talk about any of these other cryptos that aren't nearly as decentralized. But the decentralized aspect is the fundamental driver of what's giving it value. Because at the end of the day, you're right. I could use my fiat system and I could use something else that could roll back. Ethereum lost any validity when they forked off from Ethereum Classic. So that was happening years ago. Because when the chain and the people in charge, the community, decided and said, hey, there was a mistake that happened on this chain. We feel bad for the business owners because that's a really bad hack. So what we're going to do is we're going to roll it back. And then the part of the
for the
people on
record,
that said, wait a
I'm
minute,
not a fan of Ethereum, so I'm just giving it as an example.
sure. I'm just giving you an example. I'm giving you an example of Ethereum because they're the biggest one. So my points will be valid whether it is any of the other 20,000 plus cryptos. But I usually use Ethereum because that is the one that has kind of snuck in with the rest of them. Another issue that I have with these altcoins, specifically Ethereum and anything else that says they're environmentally friendly, is when you go proof of stake, you have completely moved off of what allows Bitcoin to be the innovation that it is. Like we discussed, it's decentralized, but again, it's a decentralized form of digital scarcity. And that could not mathematically be possible. It's not physically possible if we weren't utilizing proof of work. All proof of stake does is it's bringing it full circle. And now we're in a system in the digital world that is similar to the system that we operate in the fiat world. So proof of stake,
I think
I'm not even close to being a fan.
Slightly a bit exaggeration because actually proof of stake is by many aspects more secure, but it's okay. This is aside.
How? I'd love to hear how. I'd love to hear how proof of stake
is
more
because we are running out of
secure.
time. It's fine. So I think
no. This is a good discussion to have.
Yeah. So I know, but I just want to touch on a very important aspect. So even let's consider proof of work is more secure. So just to get this out of the argument. But I want to know, like, for example, what is the plan, for example, for the Bitcoin when the transaction fees get higher? Because the transaction fees is correlated to the Bitcoin price. So in my understanding and my belief, actually, that Bitcoin, this is not financial advice, but this is my understanding, is that Bitcoin will continue to grow in price. So it might actually reach like $1 million or something. So when it does that, the transaction fee is going to be astronomical as well. So I mean, how is this going to be practical to use anymore? Yes, the layer 2 is fine, but in order to use the layer 2, at some point you have to either exit or enter a channel in the Lightning Network, for example.
Sure.
So I mean, how is it going to be practical to use it? Set aside all this nonsense about it's very bad for the environment and all that, because there is a lot of other also good arguments that anything good in the world is actually consumes energy. So this is fine, but like how does it scale basically, or how is it going to later be practical? It might just be like a network for billionaires.
So I love where the question's going, and let's dive on that a little bit. So what when you look back at the Bitcoin transaction fees, there hasn't been enough fees for the system. So the subsidy has been a great thing. The way that the Bitcoin rewards have been coming out 50, 25, 12 and a half. Now we're at 6.25 every 10 minutes. The fees are going to consistently be around, we've seen around 1% to 2.5% of the actual block is made up of a fee subsidy. So when you see the value of, and again, right now, let's discuss the fact that when SegWit 2x got implemented, now with Taproot getting implemented, we have increased the number of transactions that can actually get squeezed into every single block. So our amount of transactions has gone up. What I tell people is don't expect anywhere more than 350 to 400,000 transactions taking place a day. So again, this is all just a theory. This is all just my opinion. Is eventually we're going to see the most expensive and most valuable transactions taking place around the world settling on the Bitcoin blockchain. Why? Because it offers us final settlement. So it's going to handle the big transactions, like the big boys, like trading for oil settlements, let's say. You know, Russia trading a contract with China, and it's a final settlement. It's paid. There's no more going back. So we're not going to be transferring and interacting on that layer because we are going to get priced out. So what I do see is layer 2. So like you made a good point, you're going to have to create a channel. Well, I do think that what's going to eventually happen is the exchanges and the service providers are going to offer the liquidity to their clients for L2. So for example, our exchange, that is something that we're thinking of doing, that if you're a client, we will automatically give you access to Lightning, whatever amount of money that you currently have on our exchange. There are things that we haven't even thought of yet that's going to come down the pipeline, because again, like where we're at here, who would have thought in 40 years where the internet was going to be at? So there are a lot of things where we don't even have the answers yet, but how it's going to grow is the store of value and the heavy duty medium of exchange is going to happen on the first layer. And again, with transaction fees going up, if you stored all your value, let's say in gold, and then you want to make a transaction in gold, and you actually calculated the amount of money it would cost to pick up that gold from a certain location, having it transferred, armed guards, all these things, you still have 1.5% to 2% in expenses. So you're not going to ever get away with expenses transacting on layer 1. That's just it just fundamentally is not going to go there. But I just do think L2 and L3 is going to evolve.
Okay, so but it's okay if I push back quickly on this. If you can answer, like, because we just
Absolutely.
have like a couple of minutes, so if you can answer it in 1 minute, it would be nice.
Sure.
So, for example, right now I feel like we are just going full circle. So, Bitcoin, we were saying that it's decentralized. It's very like everyone can actually connect to the network directly. It's also true in some aspects in other crypto, but Bitcoin is obviously the lead in that. But when you talk back on centralized entities that will allow people to join the network, so it doesn't seem very decentralized in that aspect, because then the average Joe basically cannot connect to the network anymore later on.
Oh no, you can always connect to the network. You can always run your own node. You can always audit and verify everything on the node. You do not need anyone or anything to do so. And that is L1. Like that's layer 1. You can do it today.
Yeah, but
I'm saying down the future to have
we're talking about
liquidity on L2. Yeah. Look, layer 2 is still in its infancy. Layer 2 has been around for about 3 years now. El Salvador is one of the leading adopters of the tech. What I'm saying is I would like to compare L2 activity to any crypto in the world, and I would still be more comfortable with L2 activity than I would be with that random crypto.
I see the point. Yeah, but if you think about it, like L2 is not as transparent as other crypto, like the actual blockchain. Like basically, you're not settling on a blockchain; you're just settling on another layer. That's sometimes it's actually it's not transparent at all. So you don't know what's going on there. You don't have, like, for example, for the nodes, a lot of crypto similar to Bitcoin, because they're actually some even copying the same technology. You can just connect to the network and download the ledger and basically see what's happening on, but this is only for layer 1. When you go for layer 2, a lot of them are actually not transparent, and I think that the Lightning Network, there is no, like, for example, way to see all the transactions happening, similar to the layer 1 of Bitcoin. So I feel like it's not as clear-cut solution as it is, or like at least not as decentralized as the layer 1.
Just a quick point to mention there. I think it's a trade-off. At L1, you want auditability and traceability because it is on the main ledger. It's an immutable ledger, and you want to see where everything's going. On L2, like, you don't need to have a coffee on an immutable ledger. It's not a necessary. It's just spamming the network at that point. Lightning is meant to be something that is streaming money. You're not looking to transact and watch exactly where it's going on every. That's actually a feature of it, that it's not as easy to see where everything is going, right? So there's two different things. One is the main base layer. It moves slow. It is very sturdy, the same way a tank is, whereas L2 is much more fast and nimble, and you can try a bunch of different things. But again, the drawbacks are it's not as strong and secure. So everything's going to have its layer. But one thing I do want to push back on that you said is proof of stake is as secure as proof of work. That is, I think, the most blasphemous thing you've said on this conversation.
I handed to you, like, let's say for the sake of argument that proof of work is more secure, so we don't have to go into technicals about this.
But I'd love to hear your thoughts on proof of stake, though.
Yeah, it's fine. I've written an article about it, but it's because it's like it will take like another half an hour. So Maybe we can actually have a part two if you are interested. We can have a part two discussion.
I would absolutely love that. Yes,
Okay,
I would
okay.
love to have that.
So, is there anything you like you want to direct the viewers to your company or anything?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. So onebitcoin.ca, that's the number one, bitcoin.ca. We can sell only to Canadian clients. However, we do consulting with clients across the country. If they want to learn more about Bitcoin, they want to find out, how to run their own node, best practices for security, anything to do with Bitcoin. We're here to help either point them in the right direction, connect them with people in the ecosystem, and help them out with whatever we can.
Perfect. Thanks so much for your time. Okay, so let's try to like have another conversation about maybe the proof of stake.
Absolutely, yes.
It would be very nice. Okay.
I'm looking forward to that.
Okay, have a nice day. Bye.
We'll talk soon.